I have a big ass conspiracy theory. Let's get into it. Seeing people all over this app, all over other apps, all over social media saying, what are the Democrats doing? What is Biden doing? They said Biden released his immigration plan that aligned and mirrored the conservative plan, and Biden persisted in his support of the blue and white country. Biden's White House has condemned student protests, has sent out press secretaries and other officials to essentially lie to the American people. Same rhetoric happening now that both Dems and Republicans are supporting the TikTok ban, and Biden said he'll sign. Like, oh my gosh, what are Democrats doing? They're going to upset their base. They're going to make voters mad. They're not going to get elected. But they haven't interrogated the assumption that this position is departing from. Incredulous about what Biden has done, about what Dems are doing, about the administration's trajectory. You have to believe they want to win. The problem is, as people are pointing out, their actions say the opposite. How can we reconcile these two things? How can they want to win, but are doing things that are going to cause them to lose the election? My conspiracy theory. I don't think they actually want to win. The reason they want to ban TikTok, there are three primary reasons. The first reason is they can't keep us separate. The second reason is they can't control the flow of information. They can't manipulate the narrative. The third reason is their donors, specifically AIPAC, wants them to. Three realities are indicative of a much larger phenomenon that's happened. Host of societal shifts, the digital intimacy that has been engendered by these social media platforms. In the past, when atrocities were happening across the world, we really weren't connected to them. We weren't connected to the people they were happening to, and we weren't connected enough to each other to be talking about the digital intimacy that we're all experiencing. Vietnam was happening, for example, unless you were seeing the pictures in the magazines or you were watching the nightly news on a regular, you weren't really ingesting, and even that, they were censored to some extent. You weren't really ingesting the kind of images that we've seen coming out of Watermelon Country, for example. They were ingesting those images. Most people famously know that MLK saw in his international travels, he picked up a magazine and saw how children had been impacted by the weapons that America was using, and that was part of the impetus behind him supporting or opposing the Vietnam War. Those moments, we weren't talking to each other as frequently, as clearly, as directly as we are. Similarly, there's been a host of global shifts that have also exacerbated this climate. The climate change, pandemic, the request by oppressed people around the world that America leave it, the realization of America as an imperial power. All of the things that are happening, our access to information and our access to each other, the ruling elite, political leaders, are losing the ability to control the narrative.
There are 100 different ways that the people who own, that the ruling class wants to maintain their position of power. Sometimes they have to use military force, but that's ugly. But what you do is you hide truth from ordinary working people. So instead of talking about the greed of the ruling class, we'll talk about what immigrants do. We'll talk about the threat, quote-unquote threat of the gay lifestyle or whatever it may be. But there is a very consistent pattern of trying to deny class consciousness. For
this app, the internet in general, our connections to each other are inhibiting their ability to do that. The United States government has put a lot of money and a lot of effort into keeping us separate. Schools, separate neighborhoods, separate career tracks, separate religious spaces. They have put a lot of effort into keeping classes separated, people of different classes, people of different races, people of different genders, people of different ideologies and mind frames. They've done a host of things to keep us separated. But in almost one fell swoop, this app has really mitigated that to a large extent. We are talking to each other. We're following people who have expertise different than ours. We're building community. We're opening our eyes, and we're at risk, as far as the ruling elite is concerned, of an educated proletariat, which they have been opposed to since the beginning of time, since the founding fathers. You can find all kinds of things in the founding fathers was like, we don't need the worker class being smart. Ronald Reagan said the same shit in the 60s. This is a consistent political thread, a consistent narrative in elite circles, wealthy circles, political leadership circles. The circumstances have shifted such that now they are losing their ability to maintain power without the use of brute force. And if you pay attention to the actions of both parties, you see them moving closer and closer to authoritarianism. Cop cities, the regressive rulings from the Supreme Court, the flooding of New York subways with National Guard and more police officers, the brutal put-downs and quelling of protests on college campuses. Even the immigration policy that Biden put forward was incredibly brutal. of that, right, their rhetoric is justifying the brutality. They're not backing down from this. They're not backing down from the awful things we're seeing in Gaza. They're not backing down from the student protests. They are telling us in thinly veiled language that they are embracing a more authoritarianism, fascism trajectory. Self-immolated outside of the Trump trial. This is what he said was happening. He said, yo, I'm trying to ring the alarm because Biden and Trump are essentially working towards the same end, which is a fascist regime, because that's the only way they'll be able to maintain power and control with this brute force in the era of apps like TikTok that's building community and educating the proletariat. They can no longer use narrative manipulation and our separation to keep us under control. They now have to resort to more extreme measures. And Bernie Sanders, in that same interview where he said the powerful keep power by hiding the truth, the first thing he said was, you could use brute force, but that tends to get a little messy. Standing is already plummeting. This whole situation with the watermelon country, on top of countries like Chad and Niger and Haiti that's telling America to get out because she's been in imperial power that's brought them nothing but strife. In conjunction with the discourse we're having on places like this about, I just saw a great video by Black academics, shout out to you, about coloniality, right? The conversations we're having here about decolonialization, about racism, about systems of oppression. These are not conversations people would have previously been exposed to, and not in this digestible of a form. So anyway, to wrap up my theory is that the ruling elite, wealthy people, political leaders, regardless of their ideological affiliations, are most concerned with preserving their power, with preserving the hegemony. So in order for them to do that, they have to be able to put down and squash any semblance of an educated proletariat. And they used to be able to do that by just indoctrinating and propagandizing and controlling and manipulating the narrative and keeping us separate and focused on each other. This app has inhibited their ability to do that, along with a host of other global shifts. So now they no longer can rely on those older tactics. They have to move to new tactics. And the new tactics are brute force, are the police state, are authoritarianism and fascism. And we are all seeing it happen. The bills they're introducing, all the stuff that they're doing, right? I think many of us are just so wedded to the narratives that we've been fed since the time of childhood that we're just not willing to come to this realization. I don't think Biden actually wants to win. I think if he loses, it'll look like an organic transition to fascism, authoritarianism via Trump, who strengthens his association with fascism and authoritarianism every day when he asking for complete immunity and all the crazy shit he doing, right? A judge actually said he was like psychopathic or something like, right? So like, if Trump wins, and Biden can be like, oh man, Trump won, now we got fascism. Even though fascism kind of helps the elite and the politically powerful stay elite and politically powerful regardless of who's in power, because the most important thing is the wealth, is the ruling class, is the blah, blah, blah. It's more important to them than the ideology. In fact, ideology, in my opinion, is a tool that they use to control us. The only ideology they subscribe to is wealth, power, money at all costs, right? And so anyway, my thing is, I think that's what the ruling class, that's what the Clintons want, that's what the Bidens want, that's what all of the people, all of the rich want, all of the wealthy want. And they'll do whatever it takes to get there. It's just that what they've been able to use non-violent or non-forceful methods, hiding the truth, as Bernie said, they can no longer do that. So now they're resulting to brute force. Whichever party gets in party, that's the path they're going to pursue. And Trump can actually even build on. We've already had these brutal protests. So when Trump does it, it's going to be like, this is just a continuation. We've been putting down. We've been flooding y'all subways with cops. We've been flooding y'all campuses with cops. Now we're just going to formalize it, right? Of course, we're going to use this immigration plan. This was the one that Democrats introduced, right? It's a weird meshing of agendas and priorities, which to me points to the ultimate priority, which is keeping us a worker, uneducated class. I actually went to lunch with a classmate, and Mama say this, and I'm going to close. I didn't expect this to be this long. My bad, y'all. I actually went to lunch with a classmate a couple weeks ago. Straight white male, cishet, lawyer, partner at a firm. He said, I have a conspiracy. I said, what? He said, I think the reason that they're criminalizing more things and they're denying women autonomy to their bodies and they're increasing our prison class and they're defunding education is because they need a dumb, cheap worker class to exploit. And I said, where's the conspiracy?